Oh, hi, hello, you nerdy nerds. This is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am your host, Liv. Today, I am here with a fun and silly and deeply freewheeling conversation with Michaela Smith, who, for the last year, has worked with me to bring you all this podcast. As I say at the end of every episode, Michaela handles so many things and has helped immensely, immeasurably with the Spartan series specifically. Like, for real, it would not have existed without her. So we thought, why not talk about it? We recorded this conversation about, broadly, what it was like to research Sparta for this series, but of course we also just talked about lots of other random ancient Greek things as they related to our research, and sometimes as they did not relate remotely to our research, but were fun and interesting all the same. This is a ridiculously casual episode with lots of tangents and rambling, but it's fun, and if you want more content, it is the perfect way to have a look at what has gone into the Spartan series and a bit more about what goes into every episode of this podcast. I will just say that in editing the episode, I noticed a couple references to Turkey, just in reference to ancient locations. But I want to make sure I acknowledge that this was recorded before the absolutely devastating earthquakes that occurred earlier this week. I'm thinking of everyone in Turkey and Syria right now. If you are a listener from that area, oh my God, stay safe. Earthquakes are terrifying. This is the bonus episode, Researching Sparta Was a Trip, behind the scenes with Michaela Smith. This is a really casual episode in which I'm literally just talking to Michaela. We're going to try to not go completely off topic because half the time we talk, we just talk about our pets. But this is work talk. Not that when we talk about our pets, it's not technically on work hours anyway. But that's why this is a bonus episode. So we are talking today with Michaela, who is I never want to say assistant because it sounds weird. So we call her the Hermes to my Olympians, but like ultimately, like in terms of, I mean, she's a research assistant. I don't know, everything. The only employee I have.
Lupin could be an employee.
That's true.
Yeah, totally. I don't know what he do. Oh, general manager.
There we go. All right. That means I could pay him and then I would have double the money. Is that a thing?
Well,
it's all still my money. I mean, it's literally my. I always joke like using my business credit card, and I'm like, I'm the only person who owns this business. It's just my credit card, but I'm like, somehow it's different when I spend my business money.
Yeah, you got to keep the receipts this time, actually.
Yeah. My mom's been making me do that forever. Oh, gosh.
Oh yeah, no.
Well, anyway, that's why this is a bonus episode, because it's going to be very casual, fast and loose with everything. But basically, Michaela has done all of the research for this series on Sparta, so much of it. It helped in large part by the fact that she is going to university and has access to things like JSTOR and beyond. So thank the gods for that. But yeah, so we just thought we'd talk about like how we did the research for this, or like weird stuff we learned about Sparta. Yeah, so I don't know. Why don't you tell me what it was like to do a bunch of research for me, Michaela?
Like, I had this day, like a month into it, where I called my mom because sometimes, I don't know.
Sometimes you gotta call.
Yeah. I'm just like, Nancy, please set me straight. And I'm just like, I'm just reading things and making notes. And she's like, yeah, that sounds like research. I'm like,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
I'm like, it feels wrong because I do this for fun. And she's like, no. Now it's going to be stressful. And I was like, great.
Story of having a podcast. You take the thing that has always been the thing you do for fun and you make it stressful. Not to
And
say
this
that
is
I
why.
don't still have fun, but like it
Yeah.
is considerably more different when it is also the thing that pays my bills.
Yeah, and this is why I didn't go to school for piano, because I was like, no, I enjoy this too much. Let's
Yeah,
not
don't
ruin
ruin
it.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's why I was so happy to like no longer work with dogs, because it was like there was a day I was walking Zoe and I was just like, this feels like work. I don't like this. Oh
No.
no. No. And now walking her is just a chore because it takes her 30 minutes to like walk the lengths of like 2 houses. She's like, I'm old, leave me alone. But she's been the assistant to the research assistant. And it's just been a lot of like thinking of keywords. Oh my god,
Mm-hmm.
keywords. Like, how specific can I get? Visiting so many libraries, I am so thankful some days. Like, there's some great things about being Indigenous and like this beautiful amount of like guilt some places have, because like UBC is just like, if you are Indigenous, you get a free library card. And I'm like, I've saved $70.
Yeah.
Yay.
That's
So we're just
sweet.
like hanging out in UBC. Just like,
Yeah.
cool. Reading in the stacks. I'm gonna learn this.
Well, one of the things I think is like both so interesting and so frustrating about Sparta is this like lack of Spartan sources. We've talked about it on the show. And so, but also like a lack of Spartan sources, but then there's the question of like, you know, how the other sources are influenced. But even still, like, so for instance, I was just recording the mythology episode that will have aired by the time this one comes out, and you know, I wanted to talk about the myth characters that are so important in Sparta. But for the most part, like, well, we definitely don't have Spartan sources for these myths.
None.
But they're nothing at all. But then they're
Yeah.
super famous characters in the broader history of
Mhm.
Greece and mythology and stuff. So it's so interesting to navigate. And then like I wanted to talk a lot about the Heraclidae, the return of the children of Heracles, but the primary source for that is Euripides. So it's like, well, no, like one, I don't have time to cover a play right now, but two, that's an Athenian play written by an Athenian. Like, I think it's probably written like during the Peloponnesian War, if not like shortly before or after. Like,
Which play? I can't remember
Heraclidae.
the play. I'm so bad with the plays, but yes, I
I mean,
know
it's got to be
Helen
just based
was.
on Euripides. It's got to be like
Yeah.
somewhere in and around that time period because that's
Yeah.
when Euripides was alive. And so,
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, and so it's just like, oh, well, I'm not going to use that play to tell the story because that feels irrelevant. I'm going to tell it one day for sure because it's Euripides. But yeah, trying to navigate that and then still get all the bits and pieces out that need to be shared. It's fascinating, and I think it's making for both interesting and frustrating episodes for listeners and us.
I mean that's like the thing though that you learn once you start studying like either the ancient Mediterranean or history in general, is sources, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you go back so far and you're looking at Greek and Roman sources. Is There's like none. We have so little. Like, my professor was talking about it in my Rome class the other day, and she was saying like we have something like 3% of what the Romans actually wrote. That's nothing.
And that's
Like,
Rome, which is like we have more
yeah.
from Rome than we do from Greece. So
Yeah.
God, that's painful to think about.
There's so much that's gone. Like, if you ever, I maybe it's not a great suggestion, but like Athenaeus,
Oh
he's
yeah.
kind of, I think, a bit later source, but he has like random citations all throughout his
Yeah.
things, and so that's how we know some sources that we don't have, which is fantastic. But it's also so painful because you're just like, no, please,
Well,
I want to read that.
yeah, I mean, I think of people like I feel like Simonides is not necessarily in the same way. He's definitely partially like that, but Pherecydes is who I'm thinking of. Pherecydes is like this ancient mythographer. He wrote a ton of stuff. He was a big epic poet. We know he wrote so much, and we don't have his stuff. We have like references to it, like a line here or there that somebody quoted, or like so we know that he wrote about all this stuff, but we don't know what it is, and that is both so fascinating and so infuriating all at the same time. And this like yeah, it's just utterly wild. And then like that exists for all of the ancient world, and then yeah, adding to it this idea that like not only is that true for Sparta, but also like, you know, most of the sources that do survive are biased towards Athens. Most of the scholarship that has been done on all of those sources for the last 2,000 years is biased towards Athens. And then on top of all that, Sparta was secretive. You're
Yeah.
like the recipe for disaster.
Disaster. Yeah, well, and that's we got most of our sources Athens, because like
Mm-hmm.
that's what everyone, like even in antiquity, they were like, Athens became like the cultural center of Greece when Rome
But
came.
they also, I
And
think, just wrote things down more, right? Like, I think they also
yes, they
just,
did
like,
like to
preserved
write.
more things.
They
Whereas
did enjoy
Sparta was
writing.
probably, they focused more on the oral storytelling, and thus we just don't end up having it.
Yeah, and I think it could be that partially, and I also just think it's like the unfortunate thing of we just don't know, because Sparta
Yeah.
didn't leave much behind. Like even like they were, we I think we've talked about this in some of the episodes, or we will, or I don't know. But it was like the Thucydides quote where it was like,
Mm,
you would never know if you went to and you saw the remains of Sparta. You would never know that they were such a powerhouse because there's nothing there. Like they
mm.
didn't do monumental building the way Athens did it. But Athens is like, they just, it's an entirely different cultural ethos. It's still very like it's it's hard to describe because I'm like, it's all Greek in the end, but then you get to know each of the city states and it's like they're so different. It's I think of them in my head like siblings, not twins, siblings, and they all love to fight amongst each other. But if somebody else comes in, they'll be like, wait, let's just pause our fighting to like fuck this one person up because how dare they mess with us? And then that person leaves, and then they'll go back to their fighting. And so it's like they all resemble each other, but they're all very, very different and unique themselves.
Yeah.
Because like Athens, so much monumentalization. Like let's just build
Mhm.
everything. It's great, and we'll make everybody else pay for it too. Like we're not going to pay for it. We'll get all our money from the Delian League because it's supposed to stop Persia again, but we're gonna build our Acropolis. Ugh. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think it also all comes down to this like idea that you have until you're really deep in the studying of the history,
mm,
like this overarching idea of Greece as a place, right? Like we
yeah,
just it's really hard to wrap your head around what it was like back then because now we think of these places as like full comprehensive countries, whereas
no, not
yeah, they weren't at all united. Like there were different city states that united with other ones, but that also changed over time and everyone was so different. They had connections between them. I've just recently talked a little bit about like the four tribes too. So they were like united by these certain things, but they were still ultimately like really different city states with really different values and cultural ethos and like so many different things that made them completely different from one another. But now we look at it as this kind of one place, and then that just adds to this like ever growing confusion about what exactly was going on, there everywhere, depending on what region you're talking about and what time period too. And
it's because they're so like they're very they all they have like the identifiers, so they have like their cultural sort of like backing of what it is to be Greek, to be of
mm-hmm.
that area. So they have like their shared cultural history in terms of like mythical history, I guess, and then they have like a shared language, shared sort of like spirituality, religion, whatever you want to call it. But then other than that, it's like they didn't have much contact with each other growing up because Greece is not an easy place to just walk around. It is
Mm-hmm.
really hard. This tons of mountains and everything. So unless you're getting on sea and like moving around the ocean, it it's hard to leave and interact with people in different areas.
Well, and add to that like the islands and how much distance there
Yeah.
is in between them, and then because there was no channel in the isthmus, like you also had to navigate, even if you were going by sea, you had to navigate all the way around the Peloponnese, like that. It's just such a, yeah, it's such a monstrous like undertaking to get anywhere.
It's a bit of a chore. It's a bit too
Yeah.
much.
It's a chore now, and it's like with ferries
No,
and planes, and
we
still it's
have.
like, god, I want to go to this part of Greece, but it's the opposite end of the other part I want to go see.
It's like it's. I mean, I guess it's like similar to BC in a sense. Like, have you ever
Hmm.
tried driving through BC?
No,
Takes
thankfully
freaking
we're
forever.
very
Oh
big. I
my
mean, we're bigger than Greece.
dude, my mom and my sisters and I drove across not all the way across Canada to Lake Huron to go to Wiki, and it was like BC was like 20 hours to get from the lower mainland to Alberta. And then it's like you get to Saskatchewan and you're through it in like 6 hours and you're like,
Well,
oh,
and then Ontario, you spend 3 days, 4 days driving through
yes.
Ontario if you make it all the way through. Oh my god.
It's just because of the natural environment. And that's sort of like, I think one of the things that people don't consider too much or think too much when they think about Greece is they don't really realize just how disjointed and disconnected everybody was from each other, and how that affects them as they're growing up, which is why we look at these individual city-states over a whole civilization compared to, well, kind of. And also,
we try
like,
to.
Greece was, yeah, fingers crossed. And also, Greece was all over the place too. Like, the Greeks weren't just in modern Greece.
Yeah,
they were everywhere too, because they had no resources. They had to leave. Like, they couldn't feed all the people, so they sent people out there, and they were colonizing up and down the Mediterranean, because that's what you do, I guess. And it's just, that's, I think, just one of those things that, like, you don't really realize until you kind of get deep into the study of it. So it's like you miss out on these, like, sort of like the geographical, or like how your space affects your culture and how it's going to develop, as well as like just how sad the sourcing problem is. And just how painful it is, because it's like, man, we're getting nobody's perspective. Like, we're getting barely any. Who can we trust? I don't know, man. I just had to read some Hesiod for class, and I was just
Love
like,
him.
God, he's so grumpy, man. Like, this, someone just give him like a cake and pat him on the back and be like, you're doing good. It's okay. Just give him some reassurance so he can take a break. He's such a jerk, but like, that's the thing. Like, those are the sources we have, and we have to work within the confines, which is why, using other like different fields of study is great. I love talking to the archaeologists that I've met, because they're so much fun. And they're like, look at this plate I found, and you're like, good job. It's beautiful. And you learn. I love what archaeologists find. They make me so happy.
Oh yeah.
Do I want to do it? I don't know. I don't think so. I have bad knees. I can't dig. And then that's hard, because like Sparta didn't leave much. So it's just like, from all around, Sparta's just like, flipping us off, being like, you cannot know anything. And you're like, I would really love to, please.
Well, and I think one of the things that blew my mind the most and I learned this through talking to the guests for the show, and like the I've mentioned it kind of in those episodes, but I recorded those episodes in the summer. I think you had started doing research. I had not looked at it yet because I was too busy with everything else from the podcast. So I recorded those episodes with the guests without any background knowledge, like, at all. And that was kind of great, honestly, because I think often I like to play the role of like the person listening and the things that they're learning in the moment too. But one of the things that really blew my mind is just this idea that like a lot of what we do think about Sparta, they wanted us to think. Like, it wasn't true, and we don't necessarily have like archaeological evidence for it. We just have like sources that were learning whatever Sparta wanted them to learn, and like completely influenced not by necessarily what was actually happening in Sparta, except for maybe Xenophon, but like what Sparta wanted people to think. And this idea that like after Thermopylae, which like I already knew kind of the more truth of Thermopylae, but the idea that like after Thermopylae, they basically looked at what happened, looked at how they were treated, and they were like, ooh, actually things would be really, really good for us in the broader world if people thought that this is how we played the game. Like, if they thought that we were this brave and like, I mean, they died. Like, let's not pretend that they didn't all die at Thermopylae, but like this idea that they were willing to sacrifice it all, that 300 Spartans stood up against what they call millions of Persians. Like, obviously it's seen as a kind of success, even though it wasn't, because like that is inherently impressive if you were to believe what people are saying about it. Of course, we get into it and it's like most of that is exaggerated, if not outright false, right? There were way more than 300. Like, so many more, let alone all the helots. And then also there were definitely not millions of Persians, no question.
It's like my favorite, reading the Persian numbers. You're just like, okay, sure, I'll let you
like, you can believe that. Okay. Yeah, one of the things that
nice.
One of the things that blew my mind talking to Rule
Hmm.
for the episode we did on like the warfare and all of that aspect is like that one, Herodotus seems to have presented this idea that they like actually counted them really carefully and thus should be really accurate, but also like if there were as many Persians as they say, there would have been a column of
Yeah.
Persian army like stretching all the way to Turkey
Yeah.
and still and reaching Greece but still in Turkey, because like how many people apparently were there, and you're like, okay, this is physically impossible.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting, but yeah, I mean, to go back to the whole idea of like basically Sparta seeing the result of all of this and the way they were respected and feared, they were like, okay, we're gonna run with this, like we are
I
gonna make
like
this our
this.
identity, this will
Yep.
benefit us, like fewer people will want to go to war with us, we will have a higher advantage when we do go to war because they're going to be inherently afraid and think that we're going to be better than we are, and like all these different fascinating things, but the idea that they did it on purpose is what I love
Mhm.
so much.
It's actually kind of genius.
It is, it's
You know,
brilliant.
like it's like I don't think they were particularly good at fighting compared to the rest of the Greeks. Quite
No.
frankly, I don't think they were anywhere near impressive. I just think they were really smart about how
Yeah.
they did things. And like that served them great. Like they became essentially like the head of Greece for some time, a short period of time.
Yeah, but
But
still, I mean, they
we
did it though.
remember it, and
Yeah.
it's like we remember it so clearly and everything, and like it even in later times, like Alexander comes in, Philip comes in, and Alexander comes in, and they're like messing around with the Greeks, trying to get it under Macedonian control. And Sparta's like, no, I will not be Macedonian. And they kind of are like, all right, you can kind of just chill there. And they let them stay. Like the rest of the Greece joins with them, but they leave Sparta, which says like, it says a couple things. Like obviously
Yeah.
Sparta wasn't a threat at that
I
point,
was
but
gonna say,
also
yeah, it
it's
mostly says they were not a threat, but
like
but
you're
still.
looking at them going, oh, you're so cute. Look at you
Yeah.
go. But like, it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
Sparta does that, and I think it's quite like it's quite genius.
I mean, it
Honestly.
worked for them. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what's like. That's the thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If it works for at least for a bit, why not? Why not let people believe that? I guess, especially at that time. Not so much now. Don't do it
Yeah.
now, please.
Yeah.
Have some, but like it's the ancient Greek world. They were so ridiculous. You gotta kind of just laugh at it all and ridiculous is an understatement, honestly. But I know I was trying to remember, a professor had told me this. I'm going to be saying that a lot because I'm quite deep into it. But a professor had told me that there was one point in the Persian War where Sparta was like, why don't we just build a wall? Like across the isthmus and like block
Oh, just
Attica.
the
Yes!
oh my god.
Yes!
Like
Keep the
there is sea.
Peloponnese.
What are they
I
gonna
know.
like? They're
It's
gonna
not the
come by water, guys.
it's not the smartest idea, but it's
No.
so funny. It's just sort of like, you know what? Let's just abandon them to the Persians. And it's like, whoa! Okay, I can understand some resentment from Athens' side towards everybody else if that's your suggestion. You're just like, leave them to burn. Good God. But,
I'm gonna assume
oh,
this is before the Battle of Salamis, which I think would have
yes.
proved like what a
Yeah.
bad like or not bad idea so much as like useless. What a pointless idea.
That's the thing with Sparta, though, is like I don't think they were particularly geniuses. I think they stumbled into a lot of things really well, and when
Mhm.
they saw an opportunity, like they were opportunistic almost. They saw an
Mhm.
opportunity, they ran with it, which is and it works for them for the most part. But then you get little bits like that, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
How is that going to work in the long run? And like it just makes you look bad within the wider like political sphere, I guess. Like nobody's gonna take you seriously after that, but you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
one of
think
the other
it's
things that surprised me so much in talking to guests about this is the idea that they also like really avoided war as much as
mm-hmm,
possible. And as soon as you bring in the idea that like they did it primarily so that they could make sure that they were home to keep their helots
mm-hmm,
in line, but also just this idea that they basically like built up such a view around them as being so scary in battle that they could avoid battle entirely, like avoid proving or disproving it as much as humanly possible. But they also had so many like I forget which guest and how exactly they phrased it, but it was like this idea of like you could call them allies, but really they were like working for Sparta. Like it didn't go both ways. Like they had so many regions like that. They were kind of like under their thumb in a really specific way, and that like they would defend Sparta, but Sparta was not expected to defend them back.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, the way they made that work for themselves is so interesting. And while, yeah, I mean, it's like, it is brilliant in its own way, but you're right. I do think it's also like they stumbled into some of it. They thought up some of it. I also think that they had a really, I don't want to say good, but I think they had a really interesting sense of self-preservation that I think worked really well in some ways and really not
really
well in other ways.
Population. So, like, I love Sparta, and I've always loved Sparta. Like, I think they're fascinating, and I like laughing at things, especially. So if I find something that has, like, it's easy to laugh at it, I run with it. I'm like, this is great. Get some giggles in. But I don't know. Have you seen, Glass Onion, A Knives Out Mystery?
I sure have.
Okay, do you remember at the point where they're like, oh my god, the whole plan is a genius, and Blanche is just like, no, it's just dumb. It's just stupid. That is how I feel about Sparta, where it's just like, you look at it and you're like, oh my god, it's so
brilliant on the outside.
But they just stumbled into it. And you're just like, oh, okay, they're just like, in ways it's like there's some, I think they're smart to a degree, but I also think they're just really opportunistic. They took their chances when they got it. I mean, because they're not even in like, thinking about like where they are in the Peloponnese, like they're in an okay spot. They're kind of inland from everything. Like
and
they're like, especially with the Helots, like what are they gonna do?
Well, yeah. I mean, their location is interesting because I mean they're kind of tucked in, but they are like compared to say Achaia or something, like they're pretty, close to the sea to an extent, but they are just kind of, I mean, also I would like to say, and I say this too much, and like it probably really makes me seem less smart than I actually am, but I do base a lot of my memory points on how much I have played Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So the map that I am picturing, I know you'll think it's okay, but I know that it's everyone else. It's a great map, and I have it memorized. So if I need to know where something is, I just have to think about that. And if it's not in the Assassin's Creed Odyssey map, well, then I'm gonna have to Google it. So here we are. But yeah, that's all to say, like, it is an interesting location that they're in, and yeah, I don't know. It's generally, it is fascinating to think about, and I think even with Thermopylae, like, it's a good example of what you're saying, of like kind of stumbling into it, because it's not like, I mean, not that they would necessarily set out to think like if we sacrifice all of our people we'll be able to use it to our advantage, but yeah, basically like everyone died, including one of their kings. Like it didn't go well, and all of the things about like not I think of the movie 300 because I think that's where a lot of people, at least in North America, like get their ideas for what the Spartans were all about. And like a lot of it, sorry.
Can I just like pipe in real fast? Because I don't know if you know this yet. I still have never watched 300.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
jealous. I
fall
asleep when movies get turned on. Like within like 10 minutes, I'm passed out. Unless it's like certain movies. But
okay, so I'm fascinated then. This is great. I actually love this so much because I think, and I think a lot of people are going to be annoyed with how much I have brought it up that it is my whole reference point.
But it is most people's. Like,
well, I hope that's true, but I don't know. The number of people that got snippy at me because my reference point for Atlantis was Disney, and they were like, "Oh my god, she has no idea what she's talking about." I'm like, well, yeah, I'm kind of playing that role of like the every person. Like, chill out. That's the point. I'm not saying I'm not that. Yeah, so if you haven't seen 300, like, what are your reference points on Thermopylae? Like, what did you think about it before going to school? Like, what is your whole deal there?
Okay, so what my reference for Thermopylae and Spartans and Greece in general, if I haven't like sort of experienced that much, so I am indigenous, and when we were younger, my mom did her best to try to keep us involved in things as much as possible. The thing is, I grew up on the West Coast, and I'm not a West Coast First Nations person. I'm Anishinaabe, so it's out east, out Great Lakes region, and so like
There's a
nobody knew
secret
me
level,
or my
secret
family.
bit of indigenous history of Canada in this episode,
Yeah,
and I like it.
man, my grandma just got upset when all her kids were like moving out here, so she just packed up like my mom and the younger kids and moved everyone out here too. And now I grow up out here and people are like, "You're First Nations? What are you, Musqueam?" And I'm like, "No,
Yeah, very far
Anishinaabe,
away.
Odawa." And they're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "That's not what we're talking about. It's fine." But my mom made sure that we were in stuff. That was really important for her, especially because when she was growing up, like a lot of my aunts and uncles are not chill with the fact that they're First Nations, and that was just because that was the culture at the time. It wasn't safe in a way.
Mhm.
My mom, on the other hand, is very, very, very fiercely in love with her culture and her people and her history. She loved her mom and everything, and she's very, very proud to be First Nations, and she works with First Nations peoples doing stuff. And she's just really like I really admired that about her, and she fought really hard to make sure that me and my sisters knew that we were First Nations, which included us going to things like the thing that the Lower Mainland does is that like students who are First Nations, they also have a First Nations counselor who sometimes takes them on special field trips.
Mm.
So we would often go to like ceremony, like powwows or potlatches and stuff, and the fun thing about being a little native kid is getting to sit by all like the older like uncles or the grandpas or whatever and listen to the stories and how they would tell us all these stories. It was really fun and loved
Mhm.
it. My sister, I have no idea how she just likes reading. That's probably it. She discovered Egyptian mythology. And so she'd read all these stories, and then she discovered Greek mythology, and she'd read all these stories. And what she would do is she would, I would sit at her feet, look up to her, and she would tell me these stories off the way that our elders told us stories
Mm.
at ceremony. And so that's kind of how I got into it. I kind of
Yeah.
piggybacked off of my sister's obsession. Danae also was really excited because her name is Danae, and she learned who Danae was in Greek mythology, and she was like, "Oh, no!" And I'm like, "At least your like hero son isn't completely an idiot. Like Perseus isn't the worst one to have." And she was like, "I don't like it." Like my mom then learned about the name, and she was like, "That is not who I named my child after." So I was also a kid who read a lot. So I just read things all the time. Like I think I man, I don't even know. I just was reading all the time. So I don't even know how I like first learned about Sparta. I feel like it was a
Mhm.
combination of Danae reading and me reading and stealing her books and reading her books. It's kind of just I just stumbled upon it at some point.
Yeah.
I don't have a clear memory of it. I know definitely when I was younger, I believed it. That's sort of the thing everybody believes about it. And then at some point, it was pointed out to me how weird that is. And I was like, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
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 I guess
okay.
I guess that's what I'm so curious about because like I obviously like knew about Sparta and stuff before, but just like all the different I guess I mean I've been saying it nonstop in this series, but like all the different things that make them weird, I think are
Mhm.
really heightened. Well, they are definitely really heightened and like emphasized in 300 in a really interesting way. And there will be another bonus episode where I'm sitting down with Ben of the Classical Studies Memes for Hellenistic Teens to talk about the movie 300 and all of its wild things. But I do think that like whether or not you obviously I mean think rational humans do not believe everything that is in that movie because it is nonsense. Obviously like it is also super racist once you look at it later and you're like,
That's what I've
oh my
heard. I've
god,
seen the clips and I'm like, how fun.
yeah, it's like Orientalism in a
Yeah,
movie.
great.
But like even ignoring that excuse me, like even ignoring that, even ignoring like the really obvious problematic stuff, you get this idea of Sparta, and it does seem like pretty realistic. And what's so interesting about it, like not only that I think it did teach a lot of people what they think they know of Sparta, whether they believe it or not, like what is fascinating about it is talking to people about it is like a lot of the stuff in Sparta itself is true, like from the movie, is true to the extent of ancient sources, but not true to the extent of like objective archaeological truth, which is so interesting. So like like the movie and like the graphic novel that it is based on is really true to Plutarch and to Herodotus, like very very true to them, which is fascinating. But then so that's what makes I think a lot of people think that the movie and the book are accurate, because they work really heavily off of those two sources. But then once you know, and you're like, well, that Herodotus and Plutarch didn't actually know what they were talking about much when it comes to Sparta. Obviously Herodotus knew way more, like he had way more access points. He was actually from the right time period, like he was born during the Persian War or like 2 years after it or something.
Yeah, something like that. His like the generation before him would have been the people fighting in the war.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
He interviewed and he spoke to them while writing.
Yeah.
History.
So he had like a lot of real access points, but because of the Sparta of it all, he got a lot of weird bullshit ideas. And so it is really interesting to think about it that way. And like, I don't want to talk too much with the movie, but as somebody who hasn't seen it, like, yeah, I was just so curious kind of like what you thought. I don't know. All of this started. Sorry, go ahead.
I think I thought a lot of it. I think it seeped in to sort of my perception of Sparta. I'm like, I've seen clips, you know. Of course, I've seen like the this is Sparta memes and the little clips and whatever, because like, of course, but I wasn't like. I honestly, like, when I was doing research all this year, I was like, should I take a moment and like watch the movie and see what people think? Because I even like. I remember one of the first things was like think about what people think of Sparta, and like how true is that? How does that align with the Spartan antiquity and reality? And I remember sitting there and I literally called my sister. I was like, "Hey, what do you think of when you think of Sparta?" And like I'm the idiot for asking her, because she was just like, "Oh, blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Wait, never mind. You're not the person for me to ask because you've read about Sparta much.
Right.
Like, you don't care." So like it seeps in. So I think I did have that sort of general like, oh, they're probably pretty good warriors kind of thing, not to the extent that they were. And so it was quite surprising going in. I'm just like, oh, look at these. Like it ancient Greece pulled through, and they're just a bunch of stumbling little idiots, just like I love them to be. Like, I'm so happy that they just were like, because I mean, like, I think you mentioned in one of the podcasts, like, whenever you play Odyssey, you always side with Athens.
Oh, ages ago. I don't feel that way now.
Oh, okay, because now I think
yeah, it must have been when I was first playing the game. Yeah,
I don't remember. But I remember hearing that being like, how dare. No. Always Sparta. They're fun. They seem like they like to, I don't know. I think I would love to see a Spartan party, because I heard what Athenian ones are like, and I want to know.
You would have never seen a Spartan party, Michaela. Those were made for dudes and only dudes. I don't even think the Spartans like had heterae in there that we know of, right? Like they was.
I bet they did. I bet they. I feel
like they were way more dude focused. Even
I think they were helots. They were,
yeah,
they were
true.
probably slaves, but
yeah,
potentially. I mean, like, also because like they all ate their meals together. Like, that's fun, but it was like all the men in the one group, because it has that sense of like keeping everyone together and of the same mind, and sort of and of having each other's backs in a way, like, you know.
Well, it's almost brainwashy though too. Like it's cult like.
It's
like
indoctrination.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that if you were to compare if you were to compare the things that like make a cult and make a cult successful to what Sparta did, like it is really specific. Like they intentionally kind of isolated them from their families. The men always had the dinner together with all the same men every single night, and it's like part of your culture, and it's really ingrained that like if you are a Spartan, you do this, you know. And I think they were probably the one of the most, if not the most culty of ancient Greek city states in terms of like being a Spartan and what that required and like what was expected of you, because there's no other where they were like, you had to provide for the state, you had to have a farm that gave the state what it needed, you could not work your farm, you had to have it run by helots, like all these different things that were so 100% required of you in order for you to be a Spartan. It's really interesting and unique.
But I always wonder, like, how much of that actually was the reality of the situation, because like I think that's definitely what the image we get and the idea we get, but like we don't get Spartan voices, so we hear the sort of like Spartan overall what was expected of them, but I wonder if it really was so stringent. And like it's hard because on one hand it's like, yeah, that's why they were so short-lived, because how the hell is
like
that
you can see the
sustainable?
evidence of it.
Yeah, like,
exactly.
how is that like it just doesn't
it
work.
wasn't
it just failed miserably and beautifully all at the same time. It was great, but like then it's like I wonder how much was like, okay, just let them, you know, maybe he doesn't want to, maybe he wants to go home for dinner tonight and we'll just let him, you know, like I wonder what it was in practice, and sort of some of the because
I mean, I imagine it was not like all like every single day without fail, but I do I don't know, like from all the people, all the guests and stuff I've had on, it seems pretty well accepted that like these parts of it were definitely like the things that made them weird.
Because they are very weird. Like they're still very like I've been trying to like how do I write this in a way that makes sense, because I don't know how. But it's like when I was describing them as like they're not really like what you'd expect of the Greeks. It's like they are, and one it's like you look at them and they are objectively Greek, like, but they're also so just strange, so weird.
Well, and I think it's because the broad like cultural, at least definitely North America, but I think broadly in like the quote unquote Western world, the generally accepted under like just way of understanding Greece is through Athens. It's entirely through an Athenian lens. Like you think of ancient Greece, you think of Athens, and like that's not, that's in large part because of sourcing and because of the people that studied it for a very long time. And I think a lot of people are working to make it not all about Athens now, but like everything we think about the quintessential idea of like an ancient Greek is 100% from Athens, from Athenian tragedy, from Athenian philosophy. It's all from Athens.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate, isn't
it? I mean, and fascinating all the same.
Getting a little bored of Athens.
Yeah.
That's fine. No, man, I don't. And you know, I think it's also people are looking at different periods too. Like the classical period has been studied enough. I was reading an article about like archaic Sparta. Like who were they before the reputation came along? And it was very interesting. I was really enjoying it. And there was a lot about just like song culture, and I'm like, musical theater kids. That's just what I'm gonna see now. Just
no theater though.
Dancing.
Music storytelling kids, but they didn't do the theater thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm dating a musical theater kid. The amount of times he just like sings and like stares at me while singing, and I'm like, please stop. I can't stand it. Oh my god, I don't know how he puts up with me. But yeah, they were very, very different. Like they were all just like more about singing and song, and of course like exercise, because like anywhere
they love to
exercise. Always exercise. Yeah, but that's also the time period when they went in and annexed Messenia. So it's like, what's going on there? Like, why did they make? And it was most probably resources, man. Like they lived in a pretty fertile place. They could grow some food, but in general, also Greece was just bad at food production.
You needed kind of everything.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to find food, and you need to feed a growing population.
It wasn't growing for long.
No, and then it just like went downhill, and they were just like, no, we're still Sparta, guys, and they're not. And then everyone comes in and they're like, oh my god, they're so cute, and they're like, fear us, poking them with little pins. Oh, silly.
So what is like the most fun, I guess, most exciting thing you learned researching all of this?
Oh my god, most exciting, most fun.
Yeah, like, and then I'll also ask you what's the weirdest. So don't feel like you have to pull out the weirdest now.
All of it. Have you looked at Laconian art?
No.
Artifacts, pottery.
Ooh, is
Dude,
it
it's
weird?
so cool. It's not
Okay.
super, it's still like, you still look at it and you're like, yes, that's Greek pottery. But it's
Right.
a bit different. Like, Athens was very good at
Yeah.
their pottery and their drawing, so we get all those because they're very pretty. But then you look at the Laconian stuff and you're like, what the And I want to put the pictures of them in the promo, but I'm like, I can't find a good place for them that isn't sketchy. But, like, it's just, it's so interesting.
Yeah. If you want to
Makes
send
me
me
very
pictures, I'll just
happy.
post them too.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll write that
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Fan pictures.
Yeah, that's really interesting. No, I like really need to get further into the Peloponnese in one of my visits. But it's not easy to do unless you're driving, and I don't do that.
Yeah, I know. We
So
did a
I've
tour.
only been as far as Naf Plio,
Mm.
which is not far enough, but it is in the Argolid. So I've at
Mhm.
least been through the Argolid. And I
Spartan
could see,
artifacts, man.
yeah, you could from Nafplio, you can see the Spartan Peninsula, so you can see like Taygetos and stuff, which is cool. At least I
That's
thought
really
it was
cool.
Taygetos. You can see big ass mountains. So in my head, I was like, "That's Taygetos. It's fine."
It's one of them.
Yeah,
It's somewhere over there in that general direction.
yeah, big ass mountains in the Peloponnese.
I know modern Sparta has a museum.
Hmm.
They hold a lot of stuff in there, so
Yeah, I need to go there
it's
and
worth it.
Olympia. I need to go to
Yeah, I
Olympia.
just need to go to Greece again. The
Yeah,
last time I was there was what, 17, and I was with my
it's very
mom and my
different. Yeah,
sister.
that was the first time
Um,
I went to. Very different. To the listener, we just talked about a bunch of random stuff and then cut it out. So we're pulling it back to talk about like, I mean, yeah, I guess early Sparta, Bronze Age, and then also like maybe Homeric Sparta.
mhm.
So yeah, like yeah, what do you? I mean, Bronze Age everything. So just
Yeah.
share whatever the hell you want. Bronze Age
I
for
mean,
life.
I love the Bronze Age
It's
to
fucking fascinating.
death. Can we do the Bronze Age next? I would love
Mm-hmm.
to because
I
it's
mean,
so good.
it's just the sourcing, man. But yeah, if you can handle all of that, do it up.
And I'll do better this time because I'm highly critical of everything I do, and I can point out every little thing that I don't like how I did. In fact, I know, like, one of my things is I'm going to be starting to write the episodes from the beginning of research.
Yeah. That's well that's the big thing that I do with the mythology, but like also because this is the first time we've really dived into history, like I didn't really know what the best way was to do it either.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the big things for me and why like every time people are like, so how can you build up, how can you take more off of your plate in terms of the podcast? And I'm like, look, the number one time consuming thing is script writing, and I'm not going to give that up because it's like my whole personality. And it's like,
Mhm.
I can't just get somebody to research because there's no point. They're going to do a ton of work that I'm not going to
Mhm.
use because I read the myth and I write the script all
Mhm.
in one moment, stream of
Mhm.
consciousness nonsense. And so like it just has to happen this way because
Yep.
that's how it works. And yeah, I mean, I think doing the research while writing in hindsight, yeah, is a smart way of doing
Especially
it.
for things in terms of like the areas of like Greece, studying Greece that I excel at a bit more compared to, because like, quite frankly, you are a bit much better at mythology research than I am.
I wonder
You
why.
don't give yourself enough credit. I'm going to say that, like,
Oh
all the
god, no,
time.
I'm fucking queen of mythology. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm happy to give
good.
myself that credit. Oh my god, are you kidding?
But
No, I'm
yeah, like when it comes to like history and stuff, like that's where I am so happy to like read about that shit. And I'm like, I just got to start writing it from the beginning, because then what happens is
Mhm.
when you're ready to dive into it, it's all written there, and you get to just go look at everything and read it all, and then you change it into your voice. And it's just so much easier instead of us both sitting here going,
Oh my god, I know. This
please.
has been so much more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
I've cried just a little bit.
So have I. Do not worry. I also, the number one thing I've learned, and we're gonna work it into next year. And I'm happy for the listeners to hear this, because I think this behind the scenes is weird and interesting, but like, we are not doing it in January. Like, why I ever think that the darkest, saddest months right after the holidays, like why I think that that is the best time to do a research heavy episode series where I completely step out of my comfort zone of mythology and I try to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Like, why I keep thinking that January is the time to do that is so far beyond me. I have such bad seasonal depression. The holidays took everything out of me. I don't know how to be creative, let alone creative about something that is out of my realm. Like, oh my god, I want to scream.
So when will we do it then? Just for my
like
own frame
maybe
of
March. Like maybe we'll do like
okay.
it'll be like March or April. Maybe
First
April,
quarter,
because exactly. April doesn't have,
okay.
well, yeah, it's second quarter.
Well,
The only reason I changed it is that March is Women's
is
History Month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for my themes, we'll do it April. April will be our month for a big
January
series.
will be sad, depressing month. We just put all the sad stories and we can
Yes.
just cry while working on them.
Yeah. Or I just do like some more re-airs, because sometimes I just want to cry.
Yeah. Dude.
I'm
straight
so
up
tired.
in like a class introduction, they're like, tell us about your favorite hobbies. And I was like, knitting.
What are those?
Video games. Crying. Eating.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah. No, it's such a struggle. And then also like the thing that keeps coming out of these special series, and particularly this one, where like I want to share everything, but also I obviously can't. And I still don't have the brain space or the time to do, like, I can work with all the research you've given me, but I still can't even like refer to all of it because you found so much. I don't have time to look at all of it. And then also like these scripts end up so much longer than my traditional scripts. Every episode that normally would be 30 minutes is at least 45. Like that means that a script that would normally be like max 5,000 words are all like creeping on 7,000 words. And it's just like it has been a trial. It's worth it. I'm fascinated. I love Sparta. I hope people are enjoying it, but I also am ready for it to be done.
Yeah.
I was already looking at, because I'm having such bad writer's block, I was like, okay, maybe I can work on like a future episode. Like, what is a really fun myth that I want to tell? Like, what would give me joy in a way that I have not experienced it in a while? Like, what would bring me joy? And I can't think of anything right now, but I need to pull something. Yeah. I need to find joy.
No,
where did it go?
It's all gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh god.
No, that's fair.
Right.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to the Bronze Age.
Right. We were talking about the Bronze Age. Oh my god.
Because I love the Bronze Age. And that's also the thing that I find really interesting about Sparta is, like, one could argue Sparta is present in Bronze Age. At least
for sure.
Peloponnesian peoples were much more present in the Bronze Age than others.
Than the rest of the mainland.
Rest of the mainland. Yeah. And that is where they get sort of like their cultural, sort of mythological understanding of themselves, right? Like, you get the Homeric epics, which, does this point to a society that they were at any point? I don't think so. But to a degree, especially when you look at like Mycenae and Mycenaean culture, like, it's fascinating. I love Mycenae. It's my favorite.
I've been to Mycenae. It's the most incredible thing ever. Oh my god.
Oh my god. Yeah. No,
unbelievable.
It's so pretty, man. And I don't know if the cistern is open anymore. It's still open. I walked down into it. It's just a wee 17-year-old.
It's dark and smelly.
Yeah.
I love it.
Life. It was great.
Yeah.
I love dark places. Like, because they're fascinating. They're so interesting, and they're present, and then our other Bronze Age Greek civilizations, other than like we have the people of like the Cycladic Islands, but then we have the Minoans, and they're so different.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really tie Athens to like Mycenae in the way that you can tie Sparta to Mycenae. And then certainly when you read like the Iliad and Homeric epic, Sparta's right there. Like front and
Mm-hmm.
center is the main character. It's the theme in the Iliad. Not theme. You know what I mean? Like she's
Yeah,
right there. And
she's
what is
it.
that? Where's Athens? Just a little brief mention somewhere. What is it? In, like the catalog of ships, just
It's only
briefly.
there's like just a passing reference in the catalog of ships. And I actually when I spoke to Joel Christensen, who studies Homer, he suggested that that could have been like a later edition when it was actually
Edition.
written down. Yeah.
Hmm.
Because like there was not nothing in Athens in the Bronze Age, but there was like very little compared to the rest of the Greek
Well, yeah,
world.
and Athens is interesting because it's one of the because it wasn't Mycenaean.
Yeah, it wasn't Mycenaean. I mean, I think that
No,
also
it
like
was. Athens was
was
Mycenaean.
it?
Yeah, it was
Oh.
the Acropolis straight up has like a Mycenaean cistern on it.
Oh shit.
That was their
Oh,
city. Whoa,
okay, thought that
what?
I like so I learned a thing
Uh
and
huh.
it's absolutely wild and I keep forgetting to like ever mention it, let alone
That's
to
fair.
you. But did you know that
Uh huh.
linear B,
Uh huh.
I think it was linear B and not A. Ooh, I
It's
gotta
one of
figure
them.
it out now. Maybe it was A. I know, but it'd be cooler if it was A.
Yeah.
Because one of the two was found all the way on Samothrace. Yes. That's the face that we want here for the
This is why
listener
I
at
have
home.
dual
A
monitors.
face.
Okay.
Yeah.
Linear.
And Samothrace is the furthest
Yeah.
island, modern Greek island in the northeast. It is so far from
Yeah.
the places that were predominantly using linear A and linear B. So far in the middle of the ocean. It's tiny. So
Hmm.
there was not a big Bronze Age presence there at all because it's tiny. It would be so much work, but linear A or B has been found there. And they did have like a pretty big archaic and classical presence. It was enormous in the Hellenistic period though. So that's the other thing is that it was biggest in the Hellenistic period, which is so late, but one of those two languages, I wish I remembered which, has been found
Begin.
there in like a hole, I think, too. Like it was like there's this archaeological site that like you can't really access because it's in the they have a military base there because it's close to Turkey.
Yeah.
And so I forget that I talked to a bunch of archaeologists there and they were telling me all about this. But yes, one of the two languages.
This is sorry, I just googled it. Outside of Crete, Cretan hieroglyphic writing
So linear A.
has thus far been found only on the island of Samothrace in the northern Aegean
Fuck
Sea.
off.
Right?
Okay, wait. But that can't be linear A then if they're
No,
because that would have been
that'd be Minoan hieroglyphics. That's the before the
did they have
linear
before
A.
linear A? Jesus
Yeah,
Christ. Oh my god. Well, linear A then was also found there because
it must
I know
have
it was
because
one of the linears. But like Samothrace, it is tiny.
yes, yeah,
Oh my
that
god.
is fucking crazy. Wait,
Yeah, and so far, like it's so far from Crete.
Oh, in addition to over 30 locations on Crete, objects with linear A have been found on the Greek mainland, in Palestine, in Egypt, on Kythera, the Cyclades, and Samothrace, as well as in
Okay.
Western Asia Minor.
That's fucking
That is
amazing. Oh my
fucking
god.
cool. Do we leave that in?
Yes, absolutely. Are you kidding?
Just us
I
having a
learned
moment.
that. I learned that and I remember it blew my mind
Hmm.
so hard. Like everything I learned on Samothrace, but like I was like, holy fuck. And then I just kept
Hmm.
forgetting to like share it ever. So I'm very glad.
That's fair. Yes, so the Acropolis was a Mycenaean citadel at some point,
Amazing.
at least from my knowledge.
So do we kind of just generally use the term Mycenaean to refer to all Bronze Age in that
Mainland
region?
Greece.
Yeah,
Mainland
okay.
Greece. They did get to Crete, so they did sort of
No,
take
I
over
know
the
they did
Minoan
because
sites,
they like,
but that's late.
yeah.
Yeah, that's towards
I
the
more
end.
mean like, do we know of other Bronze Age like cultures that we wouldn't call Mycenaean that were on the mainland in that
Mainland.
area?
Not
Or
that I know of. Not that I'm
yeah,
aware of.
okay.
Because yeah, the like it was pretty typical for Mycenaean peoples to like build their citadels on high places because you could see around you. It was more easier to defend. And you see that in, like, I think it is like the late 12th century. You see a lot more fortification of Mycenaean sites, which, you know, suggests that there's some shit going on they're worried about.
Yeah.
And you know, it blows up. But this is what I was going to say about Mycenaean Athens. Athens is the one of the few, it could be the only, or it could be one of the few Mycenaean sites that stays active throughout the Iron Ages and into the Archaic
Mm.
period. Like, they're still there doing stuff. And it's because most Mycenaean sites aren't rehabilitated. Like, you know, nobody lives in Mycenae. It's not a bad place to live, but nobody lived there afterwards.
Well, that's
Just
what's so interesting about learning about the mythology of the Peloponnese and this idea of the Heraclidae, right? And like the return of the children of Heracles with the Dorians and this idea of a Dorian invasion, Dorian migration, what have you. Like, is there way of using mythology to explain the historical thing that happened, which is that, yeah, like the palaces fell into disuse and we don't really understand why. And clearly they registered, not necessarily like they didn't give it a why that they didn't use the palaces, but they give a why to at least the idea of like different people coming in and displacing or removing the people that had built the palaces.
Yes. And the thing that's interesting then, I think, is the discourse between Athens and Sparta, especially because when you think of like Athens founding myth about you know, I'm terrible with names. Erechtheion, right?
I always forget if it's Erechtheus or Erechthonius that starts it, but one of the two, yeah.
One of them.
The snake
Yeah.
dudes.
Yeah, and them being autochthonous, they're from the earth, and they were there before the Dorians came in, and then they sort of look at Sparta and they're like, well, you're the descendants of those people who came in, so you're not actually of here. And then there was like that
Whereas the
interesting
Achaeans also thought of themselves as being autochthonous. I don't know their myth about it, but they were like, no, not only are we autochthonous, we are older than everybody else, which is fascinating.
And then when you like look at that in comparison with like especially like Orestes, like I think it was it was yesterday's episode. Today, what day is it? It's Friday. Never mind.
What is time?
What is time but a flat
you're
circle that constantly flips. Yeah.
But yeah, the promo you did for our episode with Maria Pretzler.
Yeah, so that of him being before everything. So it's like you can make some claim with that. And it's just, you know, because like the Homeric and the old stories and the mythology, that is, I mean, like I come from a culture that is myth-based. You know what I mean? Like our history, our stories, our way of view in life is told through myth. I describe it as like I grew up in myth. So like I understand the impact of that and the importance of that. You understand where you are in the world based on these stories that you are told and are passed down. But they get changed all the time because everyone has a different way of telling things. But it's just so interesting that for Sparta, their story has them coming in. While
but they do have these
like there.
Yeah. They do have all these other little workarounds, though, because in addition to what you're talking about with the conversation with Maria Pretzler, is I just recorded this mythology one, and I was referring to, I have this like big book on Heracles. It did not have anything on the Heraclidae, which I found to be hilarious.
What?
But no, I have this. Yeah, I know. I have this book called Heracles by Emma Stafford. And it had a lot of great stuff on the Heraclidae, thankfully. But basically, they have all these different kind of workarounds to account for the fact that they are and are not autochthonous, basically. Like, so the Orestes thing was interesting. I didn't find like references to that beyond the conversation I had. Obviously I trust her though. She knows what she's talking about. But essentially the other kind of workarounds are this idea that like so Heracles, you know, it's interesting even that Heracles has some kind of tie to the Peloponnese. I've yet to figure out exactly how they figure that out because he's from Thebes, but like whatever.
And Heracles is everywhere. Like you see Heracles,
well, exactly.
Like
it's like it doesn't matter because
like,
it's Heracles.
And I mean, if you like comparative mythology is really interesting. You can find figures like Heracles, and so like this like trope of this kind of figure. You find them in like almost all mythology system, and especially in the Indo-European one. Like you can see them. I mean, Thor is essentially Heracles.
Yeah,
and I don't know the Indian pantheon very well, but they have a Heracles figure too, and it's anyways, Heracles all over the place. Continue.
Well, that's the thing, and he's kind of all that mattered. And so basically it seems to me that like the idea is that like so he was born in Thebes, and his mortal father, so like he is the son of Zeus, but he obviously like had a mortal father too, who was married to his mother, Amphitryon. And Amphitryon gets like kicked out of Thebes, and he goes and he like seems to take over Tiryns in the Peloponnese, and then he's overthrown. And so like a bunch of different things happen, but that this seems to be like the kind of tenuous link to the Peloponnese. But basically that is all to get around to, there is this like idea that, okay, so we want to be both children of Heracles and at least in maybe not literally autochthonous, but like always there kind of thing. So they have this idea that Heracles installed Tyndareus like as a friend, and so then you get this connection between Heracles and Tyndareus, who then gives you the connection between everybody else, so that like sure, Helen and Menelaus aren't necessarily related to the Heracles myth, but we have this way of like connecting them. But then the other means of understanding the Heraclidae, and I couldn't figure out exactly how this worked, but basically there's some sourcing on when the children of Heracles come down to like retake the Peloponnese. At some point in the fighting, Orestes' grandson dies. And so, yeah, but then, so I couldn't tell which side he was on. So I'm like, are you saying he's like with the children of Heracles? So you're linking that, or are you saying he's one of the ones who's like killed when they come in, which you would think they wouldn't want to do that because then that would be negating the connection to like Helen and Menelaus and Agamemnon.
But like if Orestes' grandson had no children himself, no direct heir, there could be an argument for, well, our grandpapa put your grandpapa on the throne and now you're gone, so now we shall take the throne. Like, I guess either.
Well, it's that, and though you make that's exactly the point that they're making, but with a different connection, which is that like, no, yeah, the idea is that they killed off that line by killing Orestes' grandson. But what that does is negates the curse too, right? So like by doing that and like explicitly connecting with and ending the line of Agamemnon at all, then you are getting an end to my favorite curse to talk about, because I like to give it all of its name. So, the Tantalid curse, and then the curse of the Peloponnese, and then the curse on the house of Atreus. You get to end all of that with this kind of connection, and it's like further connection to Heracles, because like we're saying, ultimately as long as you have a connection to Heracles, like it doesn't actually matter the rest of the story. And it's why like there's no details in any of it. It's just like Heracles came here. Am I going to tell you when or why or how? No,
he was just here.
He was here, and that makes us cool.
I love them so much. That's so silly. Yeah, I mean
yeah.
I think also that it makes sense. Like Heracles is sort of like the every Greek's hero too. Like he's so Greek.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have a connection to Heracles, no matter where you are in Greece, like you have this exactly. Like you're Greek, you're important, you're like kind of have this sort of divine. Like I've talked a lot about in this myth episode, this idea of like basically being the children of Heracles gives them like divine right to the land, regardless of being autochthonous. And it's like he is divine and he's not divine, but ultimately he is still the only hero that ever becomes like fully god. Yeah, I don't know. It is just generally interesting. I am broadly so fascinated by Heracles and the way that like everyone wanted to be connected with him in some way, and like the lengths they did, and then the lengths that they would go to get that piece is always entertaining, and like it's always feels like such a tenuous, like stretched out thread just to be like, but Heracles,
he's one of us. I promise he's one of you. Yeah, and I mean, then he gets adopted into so many different things, and he's one of those ones that sticks out to everyone. Even now, everyone knows him, Hercules now. But like Sparta figures so much in sort of like the Pan-Hellenic myths of like Homer. Like these huge, like the Iliad is huge, and everything leading up to it, and Helen and everyone. Like Penelope is like from the area. Like it's
I know
so
they're so connected with like I mean it's like you have to think about Homer not as a myth, you have to think about it in the way they thought about it, which is that like it was basically history.
Their history.
Like
it was their history. Mm-hmm.
They really, and so it's not like any other myth. Like I compared it to Theseus in this episode, in my myth episode, because like that is the difference, right? Like Spartans are descended of the heroes of the Trojan War.
Yes.
The Athenians, they've got Theseus, like, get out of here. That's nowhere near as impressive. And so I also think that, like, for all the autochthony gets you, they it doesn't ultimately matter. They just be like, well, that's fine. Like, sure, we're not autochthonous, but we've got Heracles and Menelaus on our side. So, like, it doesn't even matter. Like, it completely negates any need for autochthony because our origins are the origins of the entire Greek world, the language, everything is tied up in Homer. And so it inherently is like the most important connection you can possibly have to your culture.
Mm-hmm. And how big a deal Helen was too. Like
yes.
Other cultures, other cities would look at, well, we know where Athens looked at her. And then it's like, yeah, because like she was a big fucking deal in Sparta. They had the Menelaon. And, you know, it's probably where they went and, like, worshipped Menelaus and Helen. And, like, they had, like, a certain, like, ceremony specifically to do with Helen as well.
Well, and they think that
fucking deal.
She was a huge deal. And they also think that the Menelaon was built over top of an original temple that was just to Helen in the time when they would worship ladies a little bit more.
Yeah. And then, Euripides' Helen is interesting because it's towards he's writing that towards the end of the Peloponnesian War when Athens is getting their butt kicked. Like Athens is not in a great position at that point. And that Helen, it's such a kind treatment of Helen. And there was an article I read, I think I sent it to you, and I was like, you have to read this is fascinating. But it pointed out, like, is there a little bit of, like, trying to soften some opinions towards them there, being like, hey, Helen, she didn't do what we said she did. She was in Egypt the whole time being a good wife. She was good. Like, it's
no cheating at all.
Just trying to ingratiate themselves a little bit with them. They're like, no, anything we said about her before in the past, she wasn't a lying, cheating whore. She was a good woman. Like, it's so fascinating to think about. But man, Sparta.
I know. I like them.
Yeah. But I do need a Sparta break once this is all done. If anyone
oh my god, I know.
Sparta to me, I'm just gonna like pterodactyls scream in their face.
I'm gonna try to find the most fun, like silly myth to get straight into. Yeah, I'm with
That'd
you.
That'd be good. Yeah, because I don't have to get started on research for next year.
You don't have to start right away. You can take your time. I'm not worried. So what? Yeah, is there anything else that you want to talk about? In terms of Sparta and what you learned or whatever? I mean, this has already been a chill episode, so we also don't need to. But I want to give you that space.
It's fair. No, man.
Yeah.
I just like, you know what? I was like, I loved Sparta going into it, and I was like, how am I gonna feel about them coming out of it? I still fucking love them, man.
Yeah.
I just see them as so much more ridiculous than I first originally thought. Which is what I hope, like, you know, I hope people take from it is like, first of all, don't take everything so, you know, don't take it all too seriously. It can be fun a bit. Some things are not fun. There are some things how much Sparta.
Yeah,
there are some things that, you know, aren't fun. And, you know, like learning, do you know, it's the thing. Learning is fun. If you learned something and it changed the way you viewed the thing before, don't be disappointed. Be happy, because now you get to take joy in it in a different way. And isn't that lovely and wonderful? Because I would never have looked at them and been like, man, these idiots stumbled into so many wonderful things.
Oh my god, I know. It's fascinating.
Their whole vein. It's like, it's just like, it's a level of genius that's only like, you didn't do it. Like,
yeah.
It's like,
It's not quite genius, but it's something fascinating.
Divine genius. Like, it's
Ooh,
just like,
you're giving them even more credit.
But it's just like, right place, right time, maybe, too. Like, that's,
Mhm.
and good PR teams, man. Wow. Very good PR teams. And, it's fun. I love it. I love ancient Greece is fun. It's
You
funny.
like it?
I like it just a little bit, just a touch.
Yeah. I'm a
Just on
kind
a
of a fan.
Just on a scale of 1 to 10, at least a
Yeah.
6.4.
I'm like broadly, I think like vaguely interested, in ancient Greece, I would say.
I'm interested enough.
Yeah, I mean, my sarcasm came through there. This is a free and loose episode. It's also thankfully like my good way of like getting back into talking to other humans, because I'm realizing as I say this that next week I have to talk to Natalie Haynes. So I'm
Oh
very
my
glad that I
God!
didn't, yeah, that she wasn't day one. In any case, listeners, let's keep all this in.
No!
Enormous thanks to Michaela, who just screeched at the news. She knows I was recording this. I'm not sure why she's quite as surprised.
I
as
didn't
she
think
is.
I didn't know it was next week. I knew it was coming,
Yeah.
but I didn't know when it was.
Yeah.
Just wave at her from me. She doesn't know who I am.
I will wave at her. Thank you, Michaela, for joining me to talk wild Spartan ridiculousness. Do you want to tell my listeners, do you want them to follow you anywhere, or do you want to stay
Only on Twitter.
You're not secret now, but
You
okay,
cannot.
great.
Here's the thing I'll say. If you try to follow me on Instagram, because my account is private, I will delete the request.
Good, smart. I wish I had gone private years ago.
Yeah, well, you can forcefully have people unfollow you if you go into your followers.
I'm not going to do that.
So
and
much
also,
fun
I
with
have 12,000, Michaela.
Okay, well, this is like on like my private account. You can follow me on Twitter.
Yeah,
like that account is fine. Occasionally, I'll like tweet something. I don't pay attention to the internet.
And is it just Pythia wannabe, or is there? Yeah. Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure there was like underscores
Pythia
or anything.
Yeah, I think so.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put it in the episode's description as always.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. This was very fun.
Yeah.
Your first appearance on the show.
Oh God.
You wonderful nerds. If you hung around through that entire conversation, then I absolutely love you. Needless to say, we lacked in structure, but it was fun, and I figured you all just might be interested in how we've been doing this series. How Michaela and I work together, now that I'm no longer an entirely one-woman operation. Michaela is also the face behind all the lovely promo videos that I post on social media, and as you hear me say after every episode, she also runs the YouTube, which we're working to build up so that it contains captions of the podcast for greater accessibility. And, well, other than the very fascinating conversations I'll be having about the poet Alcman next week, this Sparta series is officially over. I cannot quite believe how much I have learned about Sparta, and also about what I've learned about planning a research series of this podcast, which was primarily, don't do it in January, Liv. Honestly, what on earth were you thinking? It's the worst possible month to have to do something that is so much harder than a regular job. But yeah, if you caught that in the episode, or if I kept it in because I'm questioning myself, but we will probably be covering the Bronze Age next. Bronze Age and its so-called collapse. That will be the next big special research series, and it will be a good one. Not for a long while, though, because back to mythology we go. Mythology and comedy? Stay tuned. Before long, I will be diving into our third ever Aristophanes play. Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Smith, as you just heard her in all her glory, is the Hermes to my Olympians and handles so many podcast-related things, from running the YouTube to creating promotional images and videos, to editing, and in the case of Sparta, holy gods, all the research. The podcast is hosted and monetized by iHeartMedia. Help me continue bringing you the world of Greek mythology and the ancient Mediterranean by becoming a patron, where you will get bonus episodes and more. Visit patreon.com/mythsbaby or click the link in this episode's description. Thank you all for listening and for coming along for this wild and wonderful series on ancient Sparta. Whew, I am Liv and I love this shit.